Welcome to In the News for October the 24th, 2025. I am Brett Burney from appsandlaw.com.
And this is Jeff Richardson from iPhone JD. Hello, Brett.
Hello, Jeff. Always good to talk with you. It's I was gonna say it's just been kind of another week with a little bit of news. I think that's pretty much about accurate. A few things that we're gonna jump into quickly. First, we want to say thanks to our sponsor for this week, Lit Software. You've heard us talk about these iPad apps, which are fantastic. Jeff and I have been using them for a long time, and we'll talk about a very specific one that I don't know that a lot of people actually know about, Jeff. So we'll get into that here in a little bit. But first, we talked about last week, I remember specifically, new products from Apple. Although it sounds a little more exciting than it actually was. Although, at least for me, I'll speak for myself. Maybe you were a little bit more excited. It was pretty much the same MacBook Pro, the same iPad Pro, and the same Vision Pro, just with an updated processor. But other than that, not a whole lot of difference there. A few little things I know, but still, I always want a little bit more.
This first story that we're talking about right now from Jason Snell, I think it sets the theme for all three of these new products.
Good.
And it's because of, I think it all can be summed up in like a chart there, one or two charts that he has there, where he shows that over time, if you look, let's go back in time. When the M1 came out a number of years ago, it was such a big deal that Apple was making its own processor, big change from Intel, but it changed so much because it meant that Apple could decide when the new processors come out instead of worrying about somebody else's schedule, so they could time other things. And it also meant that they could custom make the processors to just the things that they need. And the M1 processor Plus, on top of perhaps most importantly, it was a huge step forward in efficiency, and speed, and everything else. So when people upgraded from Intel to M1, people are like, "Oh my goodness, this is incredible." But then since then, Apple has released, I think, just about every year a new one. We're now at the M5 that just came out this year, and you could argue it's boring, because every year they're just a little bit faster. But the thing is, that's exactly what you want, right? You want it to be a little bit better every year, because the reality is that whether we're talking about the iPhone or the iPad or the Mac or the Vision Pro, whatever it is, you're not going to get a new model every single year. I do get a new iPhone every year, but most people, think most things like an iPad or a computer. But what you want is whenever you step off of the escalator of increases, you want to be happy with what you get, and then when you're ready to step on it again, you want to say, "Oh my goodness, look how far we have come since I was last there." And so, as this chart shows, if you get an M5 today, and you had an M1 before, just in terms of the objective measures of CPU speed and stuff like that, it's about twice as fast. Twice as fast is more than big enough for you to say, "Wow, everything is so much speedier and responsive and very nice." Now, if you just compare it to last year's model, then the M4 to M5, it's just an incremental increase. Is that going to make a difference? And we'll talk about this in a second in the context of specific products. But it's so to some degree, it's not the whiz bang introductions. We all love the idea when Apple introduces the iPhone or introduces the Apple Watch or something that's brand new that we've never seen before. Those are always the exciting things. But it's these incremental changes that you really want, because you want to be able to look back, and when you decide to get back on the buying cycle, it's like, wow, this has improved so much more from what I was before. So that's what I thought was interesting about this article from Jason, is that with some objective numbers, he sort of sets the tone for all of the specific reviews. Because what we should say is, last week we talked about Apple's new devices. This week they were in the hands of reviewers, so we saw hands-on reviews, and they officially went on sale, I think, on Wednesday for all three of them. So like, you can now walk into an Apple store, subject to how many they have in stock, and you can purchase these new three devices, which, just to be clear, are the new iPad, the new Vision Pro, and the new version of the low-end version of the MacBook Pro, the MacBook Pro M5.
Perchance I am not being fair enough to Apple, because I felt like it was a little boring, but I am sort of overflying the idea that, every year they are coming out with a new processor, and I am not giving that enough highlight on that, because you and I both remember the days when there would be new processors from Intel or AMD, or even back in the day, from IBM, and it would just take forever for those, it seemed like, those cycles to come around. And even when it was a new processor, it was very odd, awkward numbers, and it wasn't really that much of a bump on any of that. Like, we never really got excited about this. And I'm almost now 5 years into these chips. The fact that a a company that is not a processor company is putting out these incredible processes that are basically blowing everything else away. That in and of itself is an amazing story. And you're right. I don't want to oversee that and not pay enough attention, because it is incredible that they are coming out. It's just, to your point, it's just like, if you had an M4, it's like, okay, come on, man. Like I want just a little more excitement. I'm used to this, but you're absolutely right. The fact that we're continuing to see these improvements on these chips is really incredible. And again, I feel like Apple is so good at doing this. Maybe they're not emphasizing it enough. I mean, I know that they do, but I don't think from a public standpoint do people really truly understand, again, this revolution that's happening here.
Yeah.
And then go ahead if you wanted to say something else.
Yeah, just one last thing on that, which is that I do remember what you referred to, those Intel days where Intel would announce a new processor, and then often there would be some random Windows manufacturer that would have it on day one. And then if you're a Mac purchaser, you'd be like, well, you know, that sounds like the latest, greatest things. When are we going to see that in the Mac?
When are we going to see it?
Or the flip side of the same thing is Apple in those old days would announce a new Mac, but the processor it was using was a processor that had been out for like 10 months. And so it's like, oh, okay, well, that part of it's not exciting. And so I do think it's just, I mean, sort of it's PR, but I do like it. I think it's nice that it comes out in conjunction with new products. But then last thing I will say is just a reminder, it's not just a little bit faster every year. Yes, the CPU is faster. Yes, the GPU is faster. But because Apple designs the processors, they can put the special sauce that they want. And it seems like every year they emphasize some little thing. And this one, and we mentioned this a little bit last week, this week, and Jason points out in this review that the thing that Apple added to the M5 processor is just a little more of the neural processing engine, so that for certain AI tasks, it is quite twice as fast. Now, again, we're still in the infancy of AI on device, but you know, Apple has this view of the world where a lot of AI stuff will be done locally on your device as opposed to in the cloud, which has advantages of privacy and security. And so I like the fact that they've done this on the M5 and they'll do more in the M6, because we are going to get to a point, it's not this year, it's not even next year, but we're going to get to a point in a few years where I think a real competitive advantage of an Apple product, whether we're talking about a Mac or an iPhone or an iPad versus a competitor, is that the Apple product can do AI in a day when AI means more than it is today, on device. And the improvements that they made this year to the M5, and I'm sure they'll do more to the M6, it's going to come to the point that it's not just that it's a fast processor, but it's that it's a dedicated processor, some portion of it. So anyway, so that's the M5 in general. Okay, so you were about to move on to one of the specific devices. Which one you want to do first?
Let's do a specific device. It's from Jason Snell here, again, complete with the Star Trek communicator next to it here as he goes through. This was a nice, short, concise review. I enjoyed it.
Do you know the reason he has the Star Trek communicator there?
I think it was at the very end here where he's talking about, you know, the product of the future, or it feels like the future, something like that.
Yeah. There was an old, I'm not a big Trekkie, but there's an old Star Trek episode where they allow a computer to basically run things instead of a person, and the computer's name is the M5. So that's a sort of reference. Is, you know, the M5 is,
no, I did not pick up on that. Okay, well done. So, very good.
Okay. So his iPad review is, again, good, but boring, because everything that we just talked about the M5 change, this is really it for the iPad. It's just a little bit better. Everything about the M4 iPad, which I'm holding right here, and I love this device, it's just a little bit better because of the M5 processor. And there's only one other real change that they made, which is for the lower end models of the iPad, they increased the RAM, and that, I think they increased it, not doubled. I think it went from 8 to 12 or something like that. But there's a little bit more RAM, and a little bit more RAM means you can have more windows open. You know, it's just a little bit, you know, a little bit better, a little more breathing room. And so those two subtle changes make it good. And again, so that's why nobody would upgrade from last year's iPad to this year's iPad. But if you've been waiting and now it's time, you know what it reminds me of, Brett? It reminds me of buying new cars, because I've been thinking about cars lately. Some manufacturers, like, for example, I currently drive a Honda Accord. Honda updates, like, they do major updates every 5 years where it's a new design and a lot of big changes, but from year to year they'll have like a little bit better things, and it might be something as simple as, you know, better cup holders, whatever it is. But so the idea is that when you walk into the showroom, you like the idea of getting this year's Honda Accord or this year's whatever kind of car it is, and you want it to be a little different from what was available last year. But the real thing that you're looking at is, I'm upgrading from my car that I had 3, 4, 5, 6, you know, however my prior car is. And so you're going to be taking advantage of those major 5-year designs, just because that's when you jump into it. And it's the same thing here at the iPad. If you're still using an Intel iPad, well then, oh my God, this is going to be goodness. This is going to be so much better than
Yeah.
before. And
Oh yeah.
and even if you're using something like the M1 iPad Pro was really, really nice because as
I
we just
still use it.
discussed, the
Yeah.
M1 was such a big step forward. We've now been far enough between the M1 and the M5 that if you decided, and you, Brett, or anyone listening to this decided to upgrade from an M1 to an M5, after 4 iterations, that's going to be like
Wow.
that, like I just
Yeah.
said, that's twice as much, that's
Yeah.
twice as fast.
Yeah.
So you're gonna like if you decide it's time for you to get a new iPad for whatever reasons, you're gonna really appreciate that speed increase. So, that's it. I mean, it's just a little bit better. So if it's time for you to get the iPad M5, so it's everything that we predicted would be the case is exactly what these reviews are showing.
Apparently, this was Star Trek episode season 2, episode 24.
Oh,
Kirk and
thank
a
you.
sub-skeleton crew are ordered to test out an advanced artificially intelligent control system, the M5 Multitronic system, which could potentially render them all redundant.
Which is a little funny because the feature of the M5
I
processor is
love
that
it.
it has better AI. And if there's anything in computers that's going to make all of us redundant, it's the AIs, I suppose. When did they say that that one aired? March of 1968. So
Here, I'm trying to
just
let me
before I was
close
born.
out of
Yeah.
it.
March 8th
Uh,
of 1968 is when it first
there
aired.
you
So
go,
there you go.
1968, and they were thinking about the M5 back then. Apple, you're just repeating Star Trek. I love it. Let's squeeze in the Vision segment here because we talked about the iPad Pro, and you had
Yeah.
a couple of stories about the Vision Pro, with
Mhm.
probably one of my most favorite headlines from Gizmodo. With all love to you, Jeff. Apple Vision Pro review: the crown of the dorks.
This is Kyle Barr at Gizmodo was pointing out that when you wear a
Good
Vision Pro,
review.
you look like a dork. And of course, it's true. Any device in these wears in your head, you sort of look a little. The one thing that has not to put the Vision Pro and the Meta Ray-Bans in the same category, but at least the thing that, because they're completely different devices, but the thing that the Ray-Bans have going for them is it sort of looks like regular glasses. They're a little chunky, so they look like chunky glasses. But some people wear chunky glasses, so that one you could wear in real life if you're wearing a Vision Pro. But again, no one's going to walk around, with some exceptions of people, trying to get clicks on YouTube. No one's going to walk around the streets wearing a Vision Pro. And in fact, if anybody's at my house, if I'm watching a movie with somebody else, I'm only wearing the Vision Pro when I'm by myself. But regardless, when you do wear it, you look a little silly. That is just what it is. So this review and a couple other ones have looked at the Vision Pro M5. And of course, part of it is what we just described. It's just a tiny bit better than the M4, than the M2, excuse me, the M2 version, which is the prior version, because of the better processor. But a couple things that it has better. And the one thing I wanted to focus on, this was fascinating to me personally. When Apple announced this new M5 version of the Vision Pro, they said that there is even better screen resolution. And I'm like, how is that possible? Because it's the same. I mean, one of the most amazing parts of the Vision Pro are these incredibly tiny and incredibly powerful Sony displays, one for each eye, that are just,
Those screens
you could not
great.
have the Vision Pro. Much like, the by the way, yesterday was the 24th anniversary of the original iPod. I don't know if you celebrated yesterday, if you had a party.
I did. Yes, indeed.
One of the iPod 24 years ago was invented because Apple realized that there was somebody in China, whoever it was, Japan, that was making these super tiny hard drives. And they're like, what could we do with a super tiny hard drive? And the iPod was invented. The same thing.
1,000 songs in your pocket.
1,000 songs in your pocket.
I watched the little thing where Steve Jobs pulled it out of his pocket. 1,000 songs in your pocket. Great tagline. Okay, go continue, please.
Yeah, no, the Vision Pro is the same way. The Vision Pro could not exist but for one specific piece of hardware, which are these very high quality Sony displays. So when I saw that this new Vision Pro has even more resolution, I'm like, well, did they change the display? No. And what they did is, I think it's technically fascinating. It's a word that I don't think I knew before, although it's been around for a while, called foveated vision. And what that means is that,
wow.
And this is a word that's been around in VR for a while. If you are wearing glasses, some sort of goggles that are going to simulate the world around you, you want to have high quality, right? The higher quality, the better. And that's why the Vision Pro is better than the very low end of the devices that Meta sells. But you actually don't need to render the 4K, super high quality in the entire field of view. And the reason for that is the way that your eyes work. If you're looking in a direction, that's what your eyes are paying attention to. And everything around you, something that we would call peripheral vision, even in your normal eyes, you're not really focusing on it. And so it would be a waste of processor cycles for a computer to render all of that in the exact same high
Right.
quality. All that they need
Right.
to do
I
is render
understand.
the part right here in the center that you're looking at. And as your eyes move up, down, left, right, of course, the whatever sort of device you're wearing has to keep up with you. And the Vision Pro, even with its M2 processor, was fast enough to keep up to you. But the thing that they do with the M5 is with that extra processing power, they say that it's about 10% better. And what that means is that the shape of the foveated area is about 10% wider. And so it's not the thing that you're
Wow.
directly looking at, but it's the part in your peripheral vision, which is just a little bit more crisp that it's sort of like you notice it, but you don't really notice it. It's one of those sorts of things. And so as the reviewers have found, the place where this makes the most difference, and to be fair, it's only a subtle difference, but it is a nice difference, is one of my favorite uses of my Vision Pro is if I connect it to my Mac or even my iPad, but especially my Mac, and you basically have a virtual monitor. So like I could never afford a huge monitor that's, I don't know, 4 feet
Right.
high, 4 feet tall, but I can have a virtual one in my Vision Pro. And when you have that, the monitor looks really great. But you can sort of, you notice a little bit more that just to sort of the edge of your vision, it's not quite as crisp because when you have a monitor that's so big that, it's your entire field of view, I can sort of half see that that window that's off to my side is maybe
Mm-hmm.
not quite as in focus. Now, as soon as I look at it, it is in focus, but because you have just a little bit bigger of the foveated area, thanks to the M5 processor, it makes that virtual monitor look a little bit more realistic, which I guess is an improvement. Now, on the other hand, if I'm wearing my Vision Pro here in my office, and I'm looking around, the fact that those, law books on my bookshelf to my left might be a little bit more in focus, I'm not going to notice that different. I mean, theoretically, it's a little bit more in focus, but I'm not noticing it. So
Right.
I just thought that was an interesting use of the processor. Now, there's other things for the Vision Pro 2 that are better. Things are a little bit faster. So if you're doing AI, for example, those persona things, which of course we did,
Right.
most
Right.
memorably the first day I
It's
had my Vision
fun.
Pro and we recorded that way and we had my avatar. You can render an avatar faster because that's using like machine learning and AI. But does it matter that it takes me 5 seconds to render my avatar instead of 8 seconds,
Mm,
especially for something you just do once? No, it doesn't. So, I
I
mean,
guess
that's
it
why,
could.
of
Right.
course, it's nicer. And, if you're going to buy a Vision Pro, of course, it's nicer to get the M5 version than the M2 version, but it's not a big difference. So, and then the last thing I'll say about these reviews is it has the new thing that goes over your head, the new dual mid band.
The
But
dual knit band.
if
Yes.
it's okay with you,
People
Brett,
were,
I'm actually going to
yeah.
postpone us talking about it because I have actually ordered one of these. And I'm going to
Ooh,
have it.
okay.
I'm not going to have it for a few weeks. So let's put this off. Let me get it and let me use
Okay.
it for a little
Okay.
bit. And maybe in like late November, I will tell you if you go to buy one today, because I just tried yesterday, I said, what would happen if I bought one today? And the soonest that it would be in my local Apple store in New Orleans is in December. They had a very small
Oh,
stock. Now, the
yuck.
one that I
Okay.
ordered like seconds after Apple announced all of this stuff, it's coming out. Now, they are available in some stores. I've seen a few people on the internet say that they walked into their local Apple store and at least some of them were in stock, but most of them are out of stock. So if you're trying to decide, don't wait on me if you're trying to decide. But I will have more to say about that new band in the future. Let me just say that. But
Well,
there is a new band.
because there wasn't just a whole lot to review, although you pointed out some good things. And even this Gizmodo review, he does talk about there's a slight increase in the battery life. So there are
Yeah.
some little
Mhm.
touches in here that are interesting. But most reviews I have found have focused on this dual knit band because that is, I guess, like a new kind of a product-ish kind of a thing.
Mhm.
And this is a good
Sure.
picture here, right? On the right side, this is what it comes with. It's just the one knit band that goes around the
That's
back of
what
your
the
head.
M2 version came with, right? Yes.
Exactly. That's what you have. And then this is the dual knit band now to where it has the back of the head, but it also over the top of the head, which I feel like some people, I don't think Apple, but there were some third party manufacturers, right, that were making something similar to this. Maybe. I don't know. There
I
was,
use one.
okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
I have one
Was
made
it
by
Belkin?
Belkin
Okay. That's
that
what I
they
thought.
reviewed.
Okay.
Yeah, and I've tried a couple of them over the years, just because you're always seeing is there a way you can make it fit, make it more comfortable. And there's a couple products that I've purchased. The one that I've ended up sticking with was the Belkin one, and
Okay. Okay.
that Belkin product that I bought about a year ago, I presume will become. I presume that I will prefer this. We'll see when I try it. I presume that it will become, completely replaced by this, but we shall see.
I'm actually pretty interested to hear what you think about it. I mean, again, it's just a band. I feel like it's not that big of a deal, but I do remember
No.
what's the gentleman's name here at Gizmodo? I mean, he was talking about the fact that it doesn't sit as heavy on your bridge, the bridge of your nose, because it does have that extra band on there. So anyway, and then
Yeah.
it has that clicky click, almost like a digital crown, but for the Vision Pro band. And people were talking about that adjusts both the over the head and the behind the head. So anyway, I'm just like just said, I'm a
And
little
there,
interested in how that's going to go.
and there's a third thing that it has too, which is the back of the band now has weights in it. And you would say, why would you want it to be heavier? But the reason that you want that is because it counterbalances. As I've read,
Exactly.
if you have
Right.
more weight in the back, it makes it on your forehead so that there's less weight in the front. So again, we'll see. The initial reviews I've seen have been, some people have said, wow, this is nice. This is a big improvement. And other people I've read said, for me, for the reviewer, the prior solo knit band was just fine, and I don't really think I need this. But that just is, it's like we're talking about AirPods. Everybody is different, right?
Right.
Everyone has a different head shape. Everyone has, a different size, so there's not going to ever be one thing that's better for everybody. But I'm sure Apple has had the time to think, well, what's going to be the best for the most people? And they apparently think this is a good idea, because the original Vision Pro came with two different bands: the solo knit that went around the back of your head, and then something they called the dual strap, which was not nearly as nice. It was just a strap that went on the top of your head and the back of your head.
Okay.
Apple no longer is shipping either one of those. Now, when you get a new Vision Pro, all you get is this new one. So Apple seems to think this is better for everybody. We'll see.
One product that did not get a new M5 chip was the Apple Watch Ultra. Okay, to be fair, this was a new product that did come out maybe almost a month ago now. And I think, the Apple Watch has an S version of the microprocessor, the S10. But I like this story from Ryan Christoffel at 9 to 5 Mac. He loves the Apple Watch Ultra 3, but not because of anything of the actual physical design. It happens to be probably one of the my most favorite aspects of the Apple Watch Ultra, the modular ultra watch face, which I still use, and I've tried different ones, but I keep coming back to this one. I love it.
It is such a great face. He's showing in the picture that you're showing on the screen right now, where he has the time in the middle, that 425.
Yeah.
It's actually
He's
nice
wasting
because
space.
that's the thing. You can actually use one thing that's really big if you like to have
I
the
do.
time really big, or you could have two things, one at the top, one at the bottom. So how do you use yours? Do you have two things in that space, or one?
I don't. You can't really see it, but I have the time, which takes about half of what the picture shows in his, and then I actually have the flighty complication. So from the Flighty app. And so I have that in the middle. Now I've seen some people will put like their calendar on there, or some people will put like your vitals. You can track your vitals on that. But I'm like, I saw this picture. I completely agree with Ryan on the fact that this modular ultra face is fantastic. But then I'm like, wait a minute, you are denying yourself yet a seventh complication that you could have on your watch face. Why would you do that? Like, use all the space that you can.
I think it's funny that you have you travel so much, Brett. In fact, as we're talking right now, you're in the state of North Carolina. I think you're
right.
always traveling. So if I traveled as much as you did, I would definitely want the Flighty app there. But this modular ultra watch face, not only do you have either one or two complications in the center, but you have 3 at the top and 3 at the bottom. So you said 7? That 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7. It's actually, I guess, 8. Also,
well, there is 8 because there is the one that's around the watch face. You said that already, right? So,
okay. There's tons of complications there, but I loved it. I mean, it was I love Kevin.
Yeah, you wrote about this too.
Yeah, I mean, when I reviewed the Apple Watch Ultra 2, I'm like, I love this watch face. And then when I upgraded to the or side graded, depending upon what you want to say it, to the Series 10 a year ago, I was like, I totally missed that Ultra watch face.
Yeah.
And the one thing that I did was I took a picture of that Ultra watch face, which you're showing right there. And then you know how you can take a picture of something and then you can show a picture on your Apple Watch? I showed
here it is.
a picture of the watch face on my Series 10, and I'm like, it looks fine to me. Why doesn't Apple release a
just
working
willing
version
this
of this
to happen?
And that's the thing. Apple has made the decision that they're going to have it a teaser, that if you want to have this really
that's crazy,
complication rich watch face, you got to get the Ultra, even though there's no technical reason they could not make it for the Series 10, Series 11, Series 9. So or Series 10 and 11 specifically. So anyway, I still have a dream. I have a dream that one day
once
Apple
upon a time,
will update the Watch OS and say, you know what? we are now letting you use the modular ultra webs, or give it a different name. Call it the
Exactly.
modular almost ultra. I don't care, but I want something similar to the modular ultra watch face for my Series 10.
Now,
Maybe one day.
I didn't look this up, but I think there's like 3 or 4 faces that have the word modular in it. Am I not mistaken? Like there is a modular watch face,
Mm-hmm,
there's a
mm-hmm.
modular something else, and this is the modular ultra or the ultra modular. Like
Yeah.
it's a little confusing when you're looking at that. So if you go and if you don't have an Apple Watch Ultra and you do find the modular face, it is possible that's in like the face gallery that they have on the watch app, but it's not the same. It's not the modular ultra watch face.
Which just
So
has
I'm
the
sorry,
most complications on it. Yeah.
but to your point, I don't know, like at least on the Apple Watch 10 and the 11, Jeff, like there's really not good reason other than the fact they put ultra in the name, and like you said, they could easily change that. That's a little crazy. So we also talked about the new iPhones that have come out. Both Jeff and I have the iPhone Pro. Jeff has the Max. I have the regular Pro. And I got to tell you, Jeff, this is sort of the anecdotal evidence. As I travel or as I talk to and come in contact with people, I have seen a number of iPhone 17 Pros in the world. But I got to tell you, the only place that I've seen an iPhone Air is in the Apple Store. I don't know anybody that actually has an iPhone Air. Now, there were several stories this past week on this. I don't know that you linked to one. But there is some rumors or some belly aching that Apple is maybe cutting back on some of the production of the iPhone Air. We've talked about this quite a bit. We don't have to rehash everything because I do believe it was a fantastic step forward for Apple to put out the iPhone Air, but I haven't seen a whole lot, at least in the wild, at least yet.
Yeah. Let me, first of all, the reason I did not link to those stories is because I try to exercise a certain degree of editorial, common sense when I link to stories.
Good.
And I think that those stories are missing the point. And let me put it this way. Many of the stories that you're referring to, first of all, they are predictions of how many iPhone Airs Apple is making. Nobody knows how many iPhones,
right,
except for Apple.
You're right.
These are third parties. These are leaks based upon somebody's cousin Joe works at some processor, and based on what they're hearing from China or Taiwan, they think there's less. Second of all, even if the rumor is correct, even if at an individual plant they are saying, you know what, last week we made 100, and this week we're going to make 50. They might be saying, hey, they're cutting back, or maybe they're cutting back from 100 to 10. They might say, hey, they're cutting back. They must be abandoning. But that's not true. What Apple has done,
good point.
This goes back to the 1990s. In the 1990s, one of the problems that Apple had is that Apple would make their Macintosh computers, and they would make a whole bunch of them with a whole bunch of SKUs. They would make too many. They would sit in warehouses. It was a disaster. One of the big things that Apple did in the 90s, of course, they hired Steve Jobs. But another thing that they did in the 90s is they hired Tim Cook. And Tim Cook, who had been working at Compaq, the thing that he was really skilled at was just-in-time processing. The idea that you only make as many computers as you need at any one time, and it allowed Apple to be a lot more financially responsible. 20 years later, 30 years, Apple's still doing that today, where they only make exactly the number of iPhones, iPads, whatever that they think they're going to need. And they have such a good relationship with their suppliers that they can ramp it up almost on a day-to-day basis. We want you to turn it up and make a few more. Now I want you to turn it down. So what I think is going on is that even if the rumors are true, and I don't necessarily know that they are, because you can't know for sure. Only Apple knows for sure. But even if they are true, I just think that this is just Apple dialing it down because they don't need as many. They have enough for now.
Yeah.
And it makes perfect sense for the reasons we've discussed, that the people that are going to rush out to buy something on day one are more likely to be power users, and they're more likely to get the iPhone Pro.
Great point.
Whereas I think the iPhone Air is going to become more popular as we get closer to the holiday buying season. People that aren't necessarily trying to buy the latest, speeds and feeds, they just want to have something good, and they look at the Air and they're like, oh, I like this. This is nice. Or over the course of the year. So I think Apple is going to continue to turn the dial of manufacturing up and down and up and down. Now, don't get me wrong. I still don't think the iPhone Air is going to be the best seller, because I think more people are going to want either something cheaper which is the
Right.
17 or even the 16, what is it, the S now, whatever they're calling those cheaper versions, or they're going to want to have the high-end version. And so that's why I
Correct.
don't think it's a
Yeah.
coincidence that when you're traveling around, anecdotally, you're probably seeing those orange iPhones, which that they're the brand new ones because they didn't have orange
Exactly.
before, but you're not really seeing the Air as much, or maybe you are and you're not noticing it because somebody has it in a case, although that's a sin and a shame
That's
to the
true.
Air. So,
Yeah.
anyway, so that's my take on those stories. But that
Well,
is
thank
a
you.
perfect lead, but it's a perfect lead into this story because what
Exactly.
Oliver is saying here, based on his report, is that he had a demo unit of an iPhone Air from Apple. I think it was a demo at least, or maybe he bought it.
Hmm.
But he decided to say, like, I want to take it when traveling, which is a great thing, as you're alluding to, because if you're traveling, it's really nice to have something thin and light, which is what the
Exactly.
iPhone Air is all about. But he says the danger is that if you're traveling, the two biggest compromises of the iPhone Air, which of course are a little bit less battery life and only having a single camera, so you can't
Hmm.
take like the zoom, the telephoto images. Are they a big deal? That was the question he asked himself. And this is just one person's report, but from his anecdotal experience, he's like, you know what? It did have less battery life, but it was enough to basically get through a day, or maybe I'd have to top it
Yeah.
off. So
He
it was
liked it.
basically fine. And he said, you know what? Yeah, I would have enjoyed a telephoto camera because you could take some real cool pictures, but the one camera that it has is still the latest and greatest Apple camera. And for the pictures he was taking, he's like, I took some perfectly good pictures. And so if you're the sort of
Yeah.
person that you just want to take, some simple, nice pictures, and of course it's got the selfie camera too. So if that's important to you, it's got the latest and greatest selfie camera. So it's just, it goes to show you that if having, the three cameras versus one camera is not a big deal and just good enough battery life, if you fall in that category, then the Air has a lot of advantages. So again, whether people buy the Air, that's another thing. But I thought the take that he has in this article, I think this is what matters the most. This is what you should
Yeah.
be
Agreed.
considering when you consider an iPhone Air.
Yeah, this is a good review, and like you said, I mean, I think these pictures are perfectly acceptable. It comes down to the
Sure.
fact if you're on vacation, is it better just to have one picture for the memory or no pictures? Like, okay, this is perfectly acceptable. This is just fine. Yeah, I did enjoy this because it did kind of put that real life perspective on the iPhone Air, and I'm glad that you linked to that instead. Let's take a moment to thank our sponsor, Lit Software. You've heard Jeff and I talk about Lit Software several times, I'm sure already, because they have a fantastic suite of apps for not just for the iPad, because used to that's how they started out, was just for the iPad. But because of the way that Apple now allows the backend programming, these apps will not only run on the iPad, but they will also run on Mac computers. And that can be amazing because a lot of times, especially when I'm working with folks on some of these apps, they may have transcripts, or they may have a database set up for TrialPad and they're getting ready to make some changes, so they want some changes, and I can even do that on the Mac, and then and it just kind of synchronizes typically through iCloud Drive if you wanted to do that, even though many times I like to make sure that they have their own local copy of these case files many times when you're going into trial. So we've talked about TrialPad for trial presentation. We've talked about TranscriptPad for transcripts and deposition transcripts, Doc Review Pad, which is an app that allows you to, if you do any litigation, you collect documents and you can put bait stamps on them, and for your eyes only, confidential stamps, all that kind of stuff on there. And brand new is the Timeline Pad. We've talked about that just a little bit, obviously, for making timelines. But one app, Jeff, that we don't talk a whole lot about because it's a very niche little app, but so very interesting, is called Exhibits Pad. And it's been around for a while. It's just a lot of people haven't used it.
Yeah. So Exhibits Pad is an app that I am incredibly excited about, and yet I haven't yet had a chance to use it. And let me tell
Never.
you why. There's a
Okay.
very specific reason why, because I am primarily an appellate attorney, which means sometimes clients come to me when the trial is over and I'm like, what can you do to get us out
Okay.
of this mess? And I love
Right.
helping with them,
Right.
which means that I've had nothing to do with the trial. Other times, clients, the smarter clients, will hire me to say, we're going to go to trial next month. We have got a trial team that's gotten ready for trial, but we know this case is going up in appeal one way or the other. We want you to be helping us in the trial room and stuff like that
Right.
to preserve things for appeal. And so by that point, they've already made decisions of how they're doing trials. Another part of my life as an attorney is I do a lot of work where I actually do get the cases from day one, but those cases tend to settle and they very rarely will ever go to trial. And so my trial experience has all been with an appellate lawyer. But let me tell you what this exhibits for. If you are a trial attorney or you're working with a trial team and you're getting ready for trial, you know how in big cases you have the binders that you give to jurors, because the idea is that both sides agree beforehand. Here's what the exhibits are going to be. You get all the objections worked on beforehand so that, this is the set of everybody's exhibits, the plaintiff exhibits, the defendant exhibits, if there's third parties in the case, and you have one big binder that you give the jury. And so, and I've been in these trials before. So then when you sit there in trial and you have an exhibit, sometimes you'll have a display so that the jurors can look up at the TV screen and they can see the exhibit, but you'll also often have a binder and you'll say, okay, we're talking about exhibit 46. And so people will turn the big, heavy binder to exhibit 46, and that way they can look at it, they can see it. Oftentimes, depending upon your jurisdiction, they're allowed to take their own personal notes in there, although there's limits about depending on your jurisdiction, whether they can take those notes into the jury room and stuff. But it gives them a chance to look at it in their own speed, because it may be on the big screen and the attorneys are pointing out something, but maybe the juror is at that time or doing a little break, the juror is sort of looking at another part of the document. So of course it's useful to have a jury binder. The problem is jury binders are big and they're heavy and they're bulky and they're pain and stuff like that. And so what the smart folks at Lit Software did, and this makes sense because the people at the company, started their life as trial consultants. They said, what if we took that big binder and replaced it with an iPad, which makes perfect sense because this is what I do in my life, right? Way back when I still have a stack on my desk here from a deposition of all these pages and stuff like that. And like, it's just, nobody wants to deal with this. What I do is this is useless. This is going in the trash can from my recent deposition because I have everything is right here on my nice thin and light iPad, right? And so why not do the same thing for juries? And so the idea is that you get a bunch of iPads, which I know there's an expense there, but you can buy them once and then use them for multiple trials. You agree with the other side, just like you do with your binder, but you agree we're going to give them all their own iPads to use during trial, and all the exhibits are there, which means that not only can they look at the documents, but like they can look at the videos there, a picture like what you're showing right there. They can sort of zoom in and see it bigger or smaller versus like a display that, depending upon their vision, they may not be able to see the display very well, but if it's right there in their hand, they can totally see the exhibit. And that's the whole point, right? You want them to look at the product that the plaintiff put his hand in and got the hand injured, and whether or not that was a knowing and foreseeable. And he's, these are the things you want them to look at. And so exhibit pad is the exhibits are in their hands, and there's all these things you can do on it. Like they take advantage of some Apple technology so that you can make it that the jurors have to stay in that app. They can't jump out of the app and start browsing the internet or checking their email or something like that. And so they stay there. And then there's tools like the jurors can like make it bigger or smaller. They can annotate on it if you allow that, to circle things, to make notes for themselves. So this is exhibit pad, and I think it's great. I really look forward to the day when someone lets me be involved in getting the case ready for trial, because I really want to use this app. Now, it's been out for a little while. Why are we talking about it today? Well, first of all, because they're sponsoring us, but there's another reason too. The app was just updated like a week ago, and the new version of the app behind the scenes, you don't need to know this, but the new thing for writing iPhone apps is you use Apple's latest and greatest authoring environment, which is called Swift UI, and it allows everything to be smoother and better. But since they were doing that, since they rewrote the app from ground one, it meant that they could sort of do some more features, right? Because you're redoing it. And what they've done is they've improved like the home screen and the interface. Things like what used to be just an icon now has a word. And you're like, well, why does that matter? Because remember, you're putting this in the hands of jurors. These are not technically sophisticated people. You want it to be as simple and as understandable as possible for them. And this new version looks like it's even better, so that the jurors no matter what the level of, technical competence of your juror, anyone can figure out, if you tap this word, exhibit, you're going to see the exhibit sort of thing. So that's an improvement. They've also made it easier to put stuff on it. Like this is, and I've seen other litigation support systems use this too, is like, let's say like you have a folder of documents and you have subfolders, right? You can put all of that into a zip file and then just transfer that zip file to exhibits pad, and it will keep that folder structure. So I would imagine you might have like folder 1 is the plaintiff's exhibits, and then the subfolders and subdocuments, and then another folder is the defense exhibits. Or if you have multiple defendants, different folders for each defendant or multiple plaintiffs. And so it's just even easier to get that over there. What are some other things? Exhibit types are now color coded to the main view, so you can more just easily distinguish between the evidence. You can rotate individual pages or entire documents, because you might, different things there. All these little just lifetime improvements. But the idea is that it's an overall better app. So anyway, for an app that I have not used before, you can see how enthusiastic about
You're
it. I
very
can't wait to
excited
use it
about it.
myself. If anyone out there is a trial attorney or involved with the trial team, you know when you have the case where that
Right.
big binder is just going to be a pain to deal with. And so
Yeah.
think about whether this is a solution. Of course, you're going to work with opposing counsel and the court on this, but again, you're doing that anyway when you work with binders, with trial binders. So I just think it's a great solution. I can't wait to use it myself, and I'm going to be, one of these days, Brad, I'll have my report to you. As now I've gotten my
One of
chance to
these
use it,
days.
but so few of my cases go to trial because everything I'm doing with is post trial. So one of these days I'll use it. But thank you to Lit Software. Exhibits Pad is a really
Yeah.
great idea. Great
I'll,
idea.
I'll just quickly say, I said this is a niche product. I mean, first of all, this is only going to be for if you're in a jury trial, if you have a jury trial, if you even go to with the part where the jury has to deliberate, right? That's typically like they're taking it back into the room with them. I mean, you as an attorney have to be comfortable convincing the judge who typically oversees the jury, they're responsible for them, and making sure that the judge is comfortable with doing this because it's just something a little bit new. But I will tell you quickly to underscore a point that you mentioned a little bit earlier. Every time I've talked to a judge or a jurist that actually used this, they were so thrilled with it, Jeff, because just like you said, those binders are so heavy. I mean, we're not just talking about one binder. Typically, there's like 3 binders or multiple binders. And it's like you have the colored tabs. You can go to a different section, but you can't search across the binder. Like people were like, I remember that one document, he said something. Where do you go? Like, you don't know. It would take a long time. You can just jump into one of these exhibits. You can do some search for words. I mean, you get the idea. Just from a pure like feasibility, practicability standpoint, it's just amazing. Everybody that I've talked to that has used it has just been enamored with it because it's so much better, so less time consuming than having to do it all manually. So I just wanted to emphasize that component up there. I love talking about the technology side of it, but just the idea that it's so much easier from something that typically is so laborious and bulky. It's just really cool. Exhibits Pad. So you can go to litsoftware.com. You can look a little bit more about it. You can email Lit Software, hello@litsoftware.com. Just let them know that you heard Jeff and I talking about Exhibits Pad. Because I will say, before you use it, and again, as an attorney, it is important, it is critical to make sure that you are comfortable with it. It won't take a long time. You can put it on any iPad. And just like you said, Jeff, the iPad can be locked down. Like all of the questions and concerns that you're going to come up with, I promise you, they've already thought through them. And it's just a matter of asking those right questions. You can send an email to them, hello@litsoftware.com. And thank you, Lit Software, for sponsoring us today. I am sure that Lit Software is going to be ready for iOS 26.1 when it comes out. This was a nice little MacRumors article that you pointed to, where Joe Rossignol was going through some of the new features that are coming in iOS 26.1. I don't know if he gave a date. When is somewhere in November? First half of November is what he's guessing here. But I'm pretty excited about some of these additional features here.
Yeah, I think the one that he led with is the liquid gas interface. And I understand why he did, because I know that some people think that liquid glass is just too glassy. It's too see-through. And so for some people, the ability to just change it so that instead of being see-through, it's more tinted behind it is going to be important. So if that's important to you, you can now have a toggle on it. I'm actually mostly fine with liquid glass. Yes, there are some times where just because of the way that something's below it and something's on top, it's
gets in the way.
It's fine. It's fine. But some of the other ones I think were good. One is the ability to turn off. There's a feature that on an iPhone and an iPad that, if you swipe from the right side to the left side, it will bring up the camera app, right? So
on the lock screen. Right now, like if it's closed and on the lock screen, so, right?
I'm now looking at you through my camera. I actually don't mind that on my iPhone, but on my iPad, it's a pain in the butt for me because number one, I never, ever take a picture with my iPad almost in ever, but I certainly never do it from the lock screen, for goodness sakes. What does happen though is I pick up my iPad and I guess I swiped it by mistake when the lock screen's on, and the next thing you know, I'm taking pictures of the office around me. I'm like, I don't want to be taking pictures of the office around me. I want to be using my iPad. So there's a toggle switch that you can turn that off, and I'm like, thank goodness, I cannot wait to use that one. And similarly, there's another one of these, fixing an annoyance. In the new version of iOS 26, when an alarm goes off, like to wake you up in the morning, if you have your alarm set, there's a button there that you can press to turn off the alarm, but you can actually press it by accident, or sometimes you're trying to press that and you press snooze.
Right.
And so they have an option now that you can, how the original iPhones way back when you would swipe to unlock, back in
Yep.
2007, 2008.
Yep.
So that swipe to unlock is now back in the form of use this to turn off the alarm. I also like it because I think you need to be just a little bit more awake to swipe to turn off than to tap a button. So maybe you can ensure that you're actually awake before your alarm
It
goes
just built
off and
that
stops
in.
waking you up.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there's other little features too. We don't have to go through all of them, but it's just the little improvements of life that they are bringing to make it a little bit better. And this is what we'd expect. I mean, 26.1, some of these are things that they've discovered late in the beta cycle that they weren't quite ready to do in 26. And others are things that they had planned to do from the beginning. Like, for example, in AirPods Live, they're adding some additional languages, Japanese, Korean, Italian, and Chinese. I'm
Yeah.
sure they wanted to do that from day one. They just knew it wasn't going to be ready for September. And so they're like, okay, we're going to have a few languages in September. I think they have like French, Spanish, German, something like that. And then a couple of them, like, we're still working on them. We're going to have those ready for 26.1. So again, he predicts November. That's probably right. That sounds like I think that's about when Apple usually comes out with the point ones, is usually around November every year. So I think that's a pretty good guess.
You mentioned the liquid glass toggle. Well, you had an interesting story today about the actual glass and how it came to the iPhone as what's generally commonly known as Gorilla Glass. And I mean, I remember when we first started talking about the idea of an iPhone with the screen that won't be scratched as much. Just a little bit of interesting backroom discussions, maybe we'll call it. Where Steve Jobs was talking to I guess the CEO then of Corning Glass, I believe is where this came from. And I feel like there's a little bit of some arm twisting going on here, but hey, it worked out in the end, right?
Corning is an interesting company. Corning has been around for, forever. In fact, I'm reminding myself as I'm looking at my iPad right now, I have been to, I guess it's Corning, New York is the name of the city.
That's exactly right. I've been there many times.
Corning is headquartered, and they have a cool Corning Museum of Glass. We went there.
They sure do.
Gosh, maybe almost 10 years ago when my kids were younger, and they have all sorts of neat things. But you think of glass, think of like Corningware that you might use, and it's like, oh, it's just glass. But actually, they do some incredible high-tech stuff. Like apparently, and there's a whole exhibit to this when you go to the Corning Museum of Glass, that they sort of invented or were pioneers in the idea of fiber optics. And one of the things that in this interview, Wendell Weeks, who's the current CEO, talks about is that when he was sort of coming into power, I guess 20 years ago, whatever, Corning was losing money on fiber optic cables, and like a significant money. Like he described, there was one point when their stock price went from like $100 a share to $1 a share, which is a pretty big change, just because of not enough sales of this high-tech fiber optics. But of course, they had the insight to say, you know what, we actually think there's a future in fiber optics. And of course there is. I mean, you can incredible amounts of data you can send. And so now like 30% of Corning's revenue comes not from the Corningware in your kitchen, but from the fiber optics that they make. So that's sort of interesting. But the reason that in the Apple world, we're talking about it is when the iPhone was first developed, this has been reported that the initial iPhone, when they made the first prototypes of it, had a plastic screen, which makes sense because you think if you drop something, plastic would be, more durable. That's certainly what the iPods used, right? And then they were looking at some prototypes with glass. And according to the reports that I've read, Steve Jobs was the one that made the decision. He was like, you know what? I think we need to use glass, not plastic. And it was made at such the last minute that all the people in production was like, whoa, 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 stop the presses. We got to do this glass. But the reason this worked is because he went to the president of Corning and said, and of course, the number of iPhones made way back when in 2007 is a drop in the bucket to what it is today. But he told him, he's like, we want to use a super strong version of glass. What do you have? And Corning said, you know what? We have this thing called Gorilla Glass that we had made years ago, but we haven't really found a good use for it yet. It's basically just a super strong glass. Like, why would you need this super, super strong glass? And Steve Jobs is like, I have a need for it because I want to be able to have someone drop an iPhone and not have it shatter to a million pieces. And he said, well, let's use that for the iPhone, which of course, nobody had an iPhone yet. I mean, nobody knew what the iPhone was, but he told him, and he says, can you make this for us? And the CEO, Wendell Weeks, said to Steve Jobs, I'd be happy to do it, but like, I can't make the number that you need. And Steve Jobs turned to him and said, yeah, you can. And so the
Yeah,
story that he
exactly.
shares here is he's like, no, 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 I really can't. He's like, oh yeah, you can do it. And he's like, do you want to be the idiot? And typical Steve Jobs sort of berating somebody to doing something. He's like, the CEO is like, if we put all our money towards this, what if it's not going to work? He's like, you need to do it. You need to do it. So as he shares the story, he's like, thank goodness that I let Steve Jobs, berate me
Yeah,
into doing this because
yeah,
Corning did do it. And of course, it was a huge success. And
changed,
Corning
right?
has been making Gorilla Glass for all these years. In fact, they weren't the exclusive person making them, but just recently, I think now they're going to make 100% of the iPhone Gorilla Glass. And so I don't know how this compares to the 30% of Corning's business that the fiber optic cables is, but a huge portion, I'm sure, of Corning's revenue comes from
Yeah,
iPhones. Because how many iPhones are in the world? A bajillion of them, and they've got this Gorilla Glass on them. Not just the front, but many of them. Some have them in different places too. And I think Apple may even use
right.
Gorilla Glass and other technology too. So the
Yeah,
Corning Apple relationship is just such a successful relationship.
amazing.
So anyway, this was the story. I've told some of the details. There's even more in the story if you read it, but I thought it was fun to have someone who is still the CEO today, but he has these memories of working with Steve Jobs at a
Yeah.
time that nobody even knew what the iPhone was all about. And it's a fun story.
I think my favorite is Steve Jobs in his brilliant way pinpointed exactly what Wendell Weeks was thinking. Steve was like, you're afraid because you don't want to look bad if this fails. And then Steve Jobs, I think in here, he says, but you are taking this away from all your employees. Like this could be amazing. Like just stop thinking about yourself and think about the company. And whatever it took, I guess it worked. And it was, it's been amazing.
Great story.
Once upon a time, there were some apps that I really liked. One was called Pixelmator. One was called Photomator. I was very excited. I forget how long ago it was when Apple announced that they were going to purchase or acquire these apps. And I kind of forgot about them, to be honest with you, until I saw Joe Rosensteel's story in Six Colors that you linked to. That's like, yeah, what happened to those apps? I don't know. I don't know where they are anymore.
What the theme of the story is that Apple has a number of apps that it seems like they haven't been updating them very much. Like, for example, we talked about Apple getting rid of the Clips app last week, but the iMovie app hasn't really seen any major new features. Now, again, I don't use iMovie
Yeah.
anymore. I now use Final Cut Pro, but he's like, what happened to the updates? And the same is true.
Right.
I think it was 10 months ago that Apple purchased, Pixelmator and
Okay.
Photomator.
Okay.
And what new features? Like they've had almost none. There was some silly thing that they added with like AI or something, but like why
Yeah.
did they clearly bought the company for a reason. It's not like they were trying to put a competitor out of business. They don't care. So Apple, and it might just be that they wanted to hire the smart people that work in the companies to work on their Photos app. But like I have to assume that Apple had some plan for the app and we just haven't seen it yet. Now, again, I hope that I wake up tomorrow and now we have Photomator Plus or Photomator next
Right.
version or whatever it is. So because I this is still the app that I use on my iPad when I want to
Oh,
do like some
really?
intense editing, simple editing. I use because I do a lot of photo editing on my iPad. Simple
Mm-hmm.
edits. The built-in Photos app is perfectly fine. But if I want to do something a little bit more sophisticated, like when I scan a bunch of images and I have to do, there's more things you need to do to sort of improve them. I use the Photomator app on my iPad. It works great. And you can still buy it, you can still pay for it, but like I don't understand why Apple hasn't done something cool with it. I realize I'm being impatient, and Joe sort of acknowledges that in his article too. Maybe let's just say it this way: I will be very upset if a year from now, this time in 2026, Apple still hasn't done
Mm-hmm.
something. But my hope
Yeah.
is that they have something planned. Maybe we'll hear about it at WWDC next year. I know it takes Apple's time to do things. Apple bought the Workflows app and didn't do anything with them. And then eventually they came up with Shortcuts, which, has been so fantastic on the iPhone and iPad.
That's true.
I,
That's true.
I
Good
hope
point.
that they have something good planned for that acquisition. I just don't know what it is, and I don't know when it's going to come out. And a bunch of us are just sitting over here saying, what's the story? What's the
What's going
story?
on? Yeah.
Mhm.
And we can't get a good answer either. I mean, it's like Apple's going to share much of anything. But anyway, I'm just glad that I remembered. It's like, oh, yeah, what did happen to those apps? Hopefully something will come along soon. Probably like most people, I've got a number of furniture items in my house from IKEA. Who doesn't like going to IKEA? You get furniture and Swedish meatballs at the same time. But now they're also making furniture for your iPhone. I just thought this was, do they call this the iPhone bed? This is part of the phone sleep collection and modeled after an actual IKEA bed. How cute is this? I have to say, thanks
It's
for linking
it's
to this. I feel
it's
like
like
my
a
life is better because I know that there's a little bed for my iPhone now.
it's a tiny little bed that you put your iPhone in and you tuck it under the covers. It's a place to keep your iPhone at night. And what their spin on this is that you also use a companion IKEA app, and you press a button on the app when you put your iPhone to bed. And their spin is that if your iPhone stays in bed for a full 7 hours, that means that you have gone to bed without using your iPhone all night. So you yourself have gotten a good night's
Okay.
sleep. And
Yeah,
I think that there's like a thing that if you use it for 7 days in a row, and we monitor that your iPhone got sleep for 7 days in a row, you get like an IKEA coupon or something like that. Now, just first of all, this is a marketing stunt. Second of all, I think this is only available in one country, like right now, like the
that's
UAE or
true.
something like that.
The
But
United Arab Emirates. That's
but
right.
they make, who knows, they may expand it elsewhere, or maybe this is just a marketing fund. But the idea of a bed for your iPhone that allows it to sleep is actually sort of funny. So it's a cute video, if nothing else.
If we have any listeners that are heading to the United Arab Emirates, please pick up one of these phone beds for me and Jeff. We would be very thankful and grateful for that. I appreciate it. Wow. Thanks, IKEA, for something I didn't know that I needed. In the know.
In the
I thought we were
know.
talking about the iOS 26.1 coming out. Here is an interesting uh I'll call it a tip because it was a small change that they made in iOS 26 that I knew was coming, but I hadn't changed it until this morning. And this is now I can change the snooze duration of my alarm clock. So just like we were talking about, that a lot of people may use their iPhones for their alarm clock, and I certainly do. In fact, I use an Anchor standby mode for my iPhone. That's what I use by my bedside, and I love it. I've been using my iPhone for a long time because I actually use it in conjunction with my sleep schedule. You don't have to set a sleep schedule, but I do. I've always liked it. Or you can just set an alarm on your own. If you want to do it manually, sort of. But for so many years, the snooze duration has always been 9 minutes, and you couldn't change it. And I just thought that was ridiculous. Well, now you can go in and you can select any alarm if you have iOS 26, and you can change the snooze duration. I think it goes from like 5 minutes up to 15, something like that. It's not like you can do it, customize it all the way, but you can go in, tap on any of the alarms, and then you get several options there. Like you can change the sound of it, but you can go in and change the snooze duration. A small tip, but it can be pretty helpful. I think I changed mine to like 6 minutes because 9 minutes to me was always so long. Sometimes I would lay in bed and I'm like, okay, I know the snooze is going to go off. When's it going to go off? When's it going to go off? And that was more anxious for me. So I just put it down to 6 minutes, and I might experiment a little bit more and see what it's like. But that's my little tip for the day.
Yeah, that's a good tip. I haven't changed mine yet, but I knew that this was coming out, and I do need to, I want to think about it. So it's just one of these many, many features in iOS 26 that I
I
haven't
know,
turned my
still
attention to,
learning.
but it's a good tip. My tip of the week is a category of products with a specific recommendation. The category of products are 3-in-1 MagSafe
Ah,
chargers. And we've talked about this
yes,
before, Brett, because as you said, you have one. I did a
that's right.
review about, it was 2 years ago, October of 2023, when Apple released the operating system that allowed you to have standby mode. And so let me talk about what these products are. What these products, the one I have at my desk here is one of them called the Anchor. And the idea is that you can charge an iPhone because you can put the iPhone and it connects to the front of it through MagSafe. And then you
Right,
can also charge your AirPods, and this one is right behind it. And then this one happens to have a little drawer on the side that you can pull out, and you can charge your Apple Watch. And so
right.
you're charging 3 devices at once. When MagSafe was first announced, I will admit that I was wrong because I didn't understand the point of it.
Okay.
Because I'm like, why do you want to do wireless charging, which is slower, when you can plug in a cord and you can charge faster and it's not that big of a difference? But what I did
Mm,
not understand is that even though wireless charging is slower than charging from a cord, in many cases, it's actually fast enough. Because if you're just going to have an iPhone sitting on it for a while you're working at your
right,
desk,
right,
the fact that it charges in 20 minutes versus an hour, who cares? Because it's going to sit there for 4 hours or 8 hours or
right.
whatever, or,
Exactly.
most of your
Right.
day. So
That's the way
that's
I
one
think of
thing
it.
that I missed originally. Second of all, standby mode is so fantastic because it means that your iPhone
Yeah.
is valuable to you even if you're not using it. So I'm sitting here working at my desk and I've got my little Anchor 3-in-1 charger there, and I'm
Right.
looking at my computer screen, I'm looking at my iPad screen, but I just glance I just glance at my iPhone screen and I can see the time, which is what I normally have. And as an attorney that, I've got meetings and, it's almost such, I've got a 10:30 meeting. How far is it? Also, I bill by the hour, so I can sort of glance, when did I start working on this? When did I finish? So I can keep track of my time. It's really useful for me, even more than just having my watch, to just
Nice.
glance and see that clock. So, but of course, standby mode is more than just a clock. It can also be pictures, and it can be widgets, which sometimes I do widgets and stuff too. So I love standby mode, and having a charger for your iPhone, better yet, a 3-in-1 where you can charge everything at once, is just so useful. So this is a category of product that I'm very much in favor of. I've been using it for 2 years. You use it too.
Same. Yep.
So what I reviewed this week was UGREEN, which is a company that makes accessories for Apple products and others. They sent me a review unit, and sometimes people send me stuff and I'm like, whatever, I'm not going to even review this because it's not worth anything. But this one, I'm like, actually, this one looks pretty cool. And so I've been using it for, I've got about a month now, and it's
Okay.
really, really nice. So first of all, it is yet another 3-in-1 charger. So it charges your iPhone, your AirPods, and your Apple Watch. What I like about it is, first of all, it uses the latest and greatest. This one's not actually technically MagSafe because MagSafe is an Apple trademark, but what they use is Qi 2, which Apple donated MagSafe to an open body. So Qi 2 and MagSafe are the same thing, right? And it uses the fastest version of Qi 2, which can charge, I forget what the speed is, 25 watts. So in other words, it's still not as fast as plugging in an iPhone, but it's so close that, whatever, for practical purposes, it's going to be fine.
It's good.
So it charges it very quickly. But what's nice about this UGREEN device is that it's sort of, I don't have it with me. It's sitting at my house right now because I had it in my luggage recently when I was traveling. It folds down. And when it folds down, it's really compact and small. It's almost like the size of like a battery charger or something like that. But then when you fold it up, you can decide, it goes up to like, I think 70 degrees. It props up your iPhone. And so you can have your iPhone propped up, and you can either have your iPhone in portrait mode, or if you want to turn it and have it,
and it holds it in place.
It holds it in place because of the magnets, and you want it in landscape mode often because that's when you get to use standby, right? It's in landscape mode. Plus, you can charge your iPhone. And what I love about it is it's so small for travel. So like over the past couple of weeks, I've had to travel across Louisiana to go to like hearings in different parts of the state. So like I was in Lake Charles or I was in Alexandria. I would drive up the night before, stay in a hotel. I have my hearing first thing in the morning. So when I'm in the hotel at night, I want to charge my iPhone and my AirPods and my Apple Watch. But I also like being able to use that standby mode because I have the time on it. So it's a nice big clock that I can see as I'm going to sleep and stuff like that. And it's usually better than whatever the hotel has in there. And this travels thing is so nice. For a long time, I know you do it too. I've been taking this Anchor one when I travel.
I know.
The Anchor one's really heavy, and the square, it's sort of an awkward size to fit into.
It is hard to pack.
This UGREEN device is perfect for travel. It's a nice size. It's very compact. It's light. It's light, and yet it's heavy enough that it's not going to topple over when you're
that's what I want to know.
Like that.
Right.
So,
okay, good.
And I also like it because it uses USB-C. One of the devices that I use at home is it's made by a company called 12 South, and it's a very nice stand. But I like the 12 South stand because it's a little bit bigger, but it uses like their proprietary thing in the back of it. And what's annoying about that is that it means it's not as flexible as USB-C. Whereas the Anchor device that I have and this UGREEN one, they both use USB-C cords. So everybody has a USB-C cord. So that's very useful. You just need a USB-C that supports power delivery. So anyway, everything about this UGREEN, it checks all the boxes. It's great for travel.
Ooh.
It's great when you're not traveling. It's the fastest type of charging you can do. It charges 3 devices at once. It uses USB-C. And so I'm like, gosh, it's plus on top of everything, it's on sale right now. I think it's normally 130 and it's $100 at Amazon. So if you don't yet have a 3-in-1 charger, they are great. I've got one at my office. I've got one at home. Lately, I've been using this UGREEN one. The one I've had at home is next to my bed, but I've now been using it at my home computer. Anytime you're going to be sitting in one place for a while or sleeping in one place on a bed, it's nice to have your iPhone in a specific spot. You know where it is. You can glance at it. You can see standby. And these 3-in-1 chargers are great. So I strongly recommend this category. Now, look, there are other 3-in-1 chargers out there. And if you find one that's better for you, great, go for it. But I will tell you, this UGREEN is definitely one that you should consider if you're going to purchase one of these. It also makes a great gift for somebody for the holidays. I love the category. I love the specific products. So that's my tip of the week is use a 3-in-1 charger if you don't. And if you currently have a 3-in-1 charger, so you know how valuable they are. And if you want something specifically for travel, this is a really good one.
UGREEN is well known as well. Like it would be something that I would definitely trust on this. And yeah, I like this. I just like the idea because I travel with that Lanker brick
Hmm.
basically, and that is almost like a literal brick. It's very heavy, which I like because it doesn't topple over. But just hearing you say this, I'm gonna have to make a purchase on this. That's great. I'm glad that they sent it to you. It's called UGREEN 3-in-1 Foldable MagFlow wireless charger. I like the flow, like the idea of charging on the flow. And it is on sale now for, it looks like just $100, just under $100, normally 140. So that's great stuff. Well, we want to say thanks again to our sponsor today, Lit Software. You can reach out to them, hello@litsoftware.com. And wow, well, we'll see what happens next week. Lots of good stuff. I'm going to have to go make a purchase right now. Thanks to you, Jeff, and always spending my money. And so we'll talk with you next week.
Thanks, Brett. Bye-bye, everybody.